I'm Ryan Milton from TeamFFLEX. Today we're going to be diving into the overall winners class from the Utah Cup Bikini. We're going to look at Class C, talk about our top 5 in this class, talk about the placings, why they landed the way they did, and what ultimately that means for you as a bikini competitor out there 2025 trying to do your best on stage. I'm reviewing criteria. I'm talking about what you need to know, what you need to be doing to do your best. And if you like that idea, subscribe, hang out. We got a lot more coming. All right, let's get down to it here. So on the screen, we're looking at Class C from the Utah Cup Bikini. This class contains the overall winner, and the class winner here, Autumn. Over here in second, we have Isabel, and over here in third, we have Amber. I'm working on a new format here, if you haven't noticed, by the way. You've been watching the channel a while, where we're putting class info up as well as, you know, the names of the athletes and their place on the screen. So hopefully this makes a little bit more sense. Drop me a comment if you like this better, all right? It always helps me to hear your feedback. So here we go. As we know, bikini's all about the hourglass shape, and whoever is exemplifying that best is generally going to be our winner on stage. All 3 of these athletes in this lineup very much do have a good hourglass structure, good overall hourglass shape. No doubt, you know, pretty competitive here lineup at the Utah Cup. So, you know, what you want to remember about the hourglass, anybody watching, is that this does not come from, you know, crazy dieting, things like that. I mean, obviously conditioning is a variable, but your shape as a bikini competitor is going to be created by, guess what? Muscle, all right? So that's what creates this hourglass shape. And if we look here at Autumn, she's got, you know, a little bit of delt shape going on here, front, lateral, and we'll see rear holding fullness, showing that size. It creates that top piece of that hourglass shape. Really key and critical that you have that. If you don't have that in bikini, it's going to be a problem for you, all right? So you want to make sure you have that. Midsection wise, you always do want to see a tapered look. So her front pose is a little bit more squared off, but that's all right. It's not hurting nothing. You know, it's all good where it is. You know, it does kind of maybe add a little bit more width to the midsection, but still she's pulling off a pretty aesthetic overall look right there to taper that in. So tapering it at the waist, conditioning wise, what you want to showcase is a flat stomach. You know, oblique lines and things like this do show on most bikini, but it's not really a requirement. Judges really want to make sure you don't hold extra body fat. Lower body wise, where we see, you know, the shape exemplify out is in the glutes, in the quads, and the hamstrings, where we see the fullness overall, the depth of that muscle being created right here. She has a lot of size lower body. So out of this top 3, she's the most muscular right now in bikini. So holding the most muscle, the most shape, most size, pretty similar conditioning to everybody else in that top 3, but more muscle, continuing to be a message we're seeing from judges right now. 2025 season bikini. You got to have that muscle. Got to be bringing that shape. That's where it's coming from. That's what they want to be seeing. All right. We look over here at Isabel. Good overall shoulder shape. You can see it taper into the waist pretty well. She's got a little bit of a harder oblique line here. Some of that can be posing. Some of that can be tan. Things like that. And maybe the fact that she just has more oblique muscle there. Lower body wise, good glute structure overall. Hamstrings and quads all match in good balance. That's what you want to note as a bikini competitor. Got to have your hamstrings, your glutes, and your quads all come together in symmetry, okay? It's not just about the size, it's also about symmetry in that lower body. So very symmetrical physique, very good for second place here in this lineup. And overall, you know, looking at this, not a lot of differences, but she does have a little bit less size, not as much fullness into the shoulder, not as much into the glute. So these are key markers here. Again, judges continue to emphasize that muscle and that shape in bikini, which makes a lot of sense considering, you know, fit model division and where bikini has just generally evolved over time. Looking over here at third, Amber. So Amber has a good shoulder shape, a bit more of a depleted look overall, we could say, right? So a little bit leaner. And when you get leaner as a bikini competitor, it does kind of end up, you know, pulling a little bit of fullness out of your muscles. So she still has all that muscle shape and size, but it does look a little bit flattened, right? And you've seen in former videos when I say, if you see the standing leg, you can see things going on here. A lot of times that's an indicator it's a little bit too hard of a look. So for her, you know, she's a little bit leaner, maybe a little bit more depleted, still has good shape overall. Tapers in at the waist pretty well, but not as much size and shape in the glutes. All of that matches well. Glutes, quads, hamstrings all match well. All good muscle there. Maybe just a little bit leaner, a little bit more depleted, which again, we've kind of seen that being happening in bikini a lot, where judges are not really trying to push that criteria down, into, they don't want you being too lean, too hard. They don't want that, right? As I always say, though, we don't know the full story till we get to the back. So here's where we are. We can see Autumn here. We don't see a lot of shoulders here, but pretty common in bikini not to. We know they're there. Still that shape, right? And you don't really often always see a taper in at the waist here either, although it is noted. Primarily what judges are looking at is obviously going to be lower body. So upper glute development, very key and critical. She has it. She's got that fullness, this slight separation between the glute and hamstring tie-in. She definitely has that. A little bit more of a quad sweep from the back here. So she's got a lot of muscle in the lower body, and the hamstrings overall is developed. So she has, pretty pronounced, honestly, a little bit more muscular of a lower body than we generally see in a lot of bikini events right now. But hey, that's what happens at events, right? They kind of can go any which way based on who's there. Judges on this day went with a more muscle look for sure, considering especially she went on to win the overall. So that overall upper glute shape, that fullness really emphasized here. This tie-in's a bit harder than we might normally see in bikini. And, like I said, we did see a lot of quad sweep on the outside. Generally, I start to see that more happen with wellness competitors, right? So it could be a case where, really that's kind of what we're looking at here with that is a little bit more muscle, but hey, that's all right. That's how these shows go sometimes. If we look over here at Isabel, what we can see on Isabel is a little bit of that shoulder shape, all tapers in well. Lower body-wise, structure's all there, glute structure, hams, quads, it's all there. Not as much, though. You'll notice not as much of a 3D effect going on here. So they were very close from the front. The gap gets widened a bit from the back. Need a little bit more depth to the glutes overall, more of that tie-in pulling through, maybe just a little bit more muscle size in that 3D that creates that depth of the glutes and the hamstrings. You really got to have that if you want to do your best on bikini stage. Looking over here at Amber, everything's here. It's all tying in well, tapers into the waist. Definitely more of a depleted look, but you can see good glute structure, quads, hamstrings, everything's all where it should be. But since she's leaner, it looks less. It looks less full. It's not, not as much going on there. That can be a major factor, right? That can be, again, just indicating a little bit too lean, a little bit less full, doesn't really hold a lot of weight up against, Autumn in the overall group, where she's got a lot more depth, a lot more muscle coming through here. So that is a main tier factor that you really want to consider if you're a bikini competitor right now, trying to figure out your best way to, pull off your 2025 season. By the way, if this is confusing to you, you're not understanding what I'm talking about, you're like, how is he seeing all this? Go do the free trial. Pull up your phone, grab your phone right now, type it in, teamfflex.com/7-day free trial. You get to train with me free for 7 days, where I can give you feedback on your physique. I can design you custom training sessions. I can show you, what you need to be doing, what areas you need to improve, and how to get your best bikini look. So if you like the channel, you learn stuff here. It's giving you insights, ideas, things you take, which I get comments and messages from people every single day saying how helpful the channel is. This will help you 100 times more than the channel does if you go do this trial and check that out. So you just simply can pull that link up anytime. It's also in the description here if you want to click that. Easier. No obligation to sign up, by the way. You don't put payment information in. You're not getting charged anything, not even a single cent. It's a free experience that I want to give back to the bodybuilding community and help all of you do better on stage. So really, that's why we have it, okay? Check it out. All right, so now let's take a look at the rest of our lineup here. Basically, at this point, we're going to be moving right into the next in the group here, fourth, and there was only 4, so we're going to add our 4th place into the mix here. We're going to leave Amber right where she's at because she was the 3rd place winner. There's only 4 in this class C for the open, so let's assess a little bit on Marley here. So Marley taking 4th, she comes in here. A little bit more, hold on a sec, gotta get over to the right draw there. So she, out of this lineup, a good shape in the shoulders, tapers into the waist pretty well. Lower body is all there. Not as much muscle, right? Not as much shape coming through. So still good base, good framework for this division, no doubt. Represents bikini at the NPC level, what you're going to see many competitions. But overall, we can tell, just not as much of that shoulder shape coming through. A little bit more width in the waist here, and definitely not as much going on in the lower body. The glutes, quads, hamstrings. She does have good quad development. It does kind of overpower what's going on with the glutes and the hamstrings. So she's taken fourth in this class. It makes sense when you look at it in that context, considering the development is really what judges went for at this one, because Autumn, she's by far the most developed in this class, most full, most muscular shape, and she goes on to win that class, right? And also the overall. So very big win for her in that lineup there. Looking from the back, Marley here, we can see good shoulder shape overall. Not as much, though, as we may see on some of the rest of the group. Tapers into the waist pretty well. Lower body-wise, good structure. Needs more, development, more depth, more of that upper glute fullness specific, more tie-in pulling through here, and all of that would really kind of tie it together for a slam dunk look for her in this lineup, taking fourth. And, that's basically what we see out of that top two. We get an athlete that's a little bit leaner, more depleted. And then, fourth place Marley here maybe needs a little bit more muscle. So, again, pretty common stuff for what you're going to see at the NPC level at these events. If you have been not paying attention to shows, go to competitions. Don't just watch my channel, okay? Go to an actual competition. See what you think. See what you think about it. Go through that. See what the actual experience is for you, and pay attention to what's actually going on. Of course, watch the channel. Pay attention to everything we got going on here, but definitely want to go to competitions and see a little bit more about that. Let's move now into our class winners. So I want to actually compare now Autumn, who we just talked about, to the class winners here in this group. This is now going to be, the other class winners, she would compete in the overall basically, and let's take a look. It gives you, again, just a little bit more insight into bikini division, what judges are really hammering on, what they're looking for, what they're trying to emphasize for all of you out there, 2025, like, hey, here's what we're looking for, here's where we're at. So we don't need to review Autumn again, we already did that. Class B winner, Cynthia here. Note also, I cannot do Class A because there was no photos that were working on the website at that time for Class A winner. But we will talk about Class B Cynthia. So Cynthia, this is where we start to get a little bit of a difference going on, right? So Cynthia is a very muscular athlete in this group. She wins Class B, but definitely very big shoulders. Very dramatic taper into the waist, super narrow waist effect here, and then lower body wise, a lot of glutes, a lot of quads, and a lot of hamstring muscles. So she definitely has a super solid hourglass look, really pulled off a lot by that super narrow waist effect, but also the fact she's carrying a lot of muscle. She's got more muscle than Autumn for sure. But, at least in the front, we got to wait till we get to the back, as you know, right? We got to wait till we get to that back pose. But from this angle, she looks to be more muscular. And again, that's something I want to note, because if she is in fact more muscular, right, that's generally also what we're seeing with bikini. You don't want to be too muscular because you won't end up winning the overall. So she wins her class, absolutely nothing to scoff at. Great physique, great quality. But it is worth noting, maybe more muscle, again, like I've been saying all year, is kind of getting hammered at shows right now. Don't be too muscular in bikini because you're not going to win that overall. You can win your class, but, overall, if that's your goal, you want to look at really nailing your size, symmetry, and proportion on your frame best you can. Let's look at Class D, Melissa over here. So Melissa has good overall shoulder shape, a bit more of a lean look, right? So she's a bit leaner. We can see it in the standing leg here and in the midsection and even into the arms, the upper body, start seeing veins and things here. But overall, great taper into the waist here. Good glute structure, good match with the quads and the hamstrings. The symmetry is all there. Everything looks really complete there, wins the class. Again, she does kind of give me just a tad more maybe muscle of a look than Autumn, our overall winner. So that's kind of interesting. Again, just to note that. Let's go to the back though. This is where the story's always told. So Cynthia from the back, Good overall shoulder shape, tapers in very well at the waist here. Nice hourglass effect. Lower body wise, glutes seem to have good overall upper structure. Ties in pretty well here. This is more, what we typically see in bikini for tie-ins. Her quads and her hamstrings look to be a bit overpowering to the glutes though. So that may be a thing where judges went with a little bit more of this balanced symmetry look like we get from Autumn here, but also clearly Autumn has more depth to her glutes, more muscle here in the glutes from the back. So Cynthia looks, very muscled from the front. We lose a little bit of that when we get to the back. So balance and symmetry, all that is key for all of you watching. Remember, bikini, up, down, left, right symmetry. You want to really get that, lock that in with that fullness overall. If we look over here at class D now, Melissa, what we can see, good overall shoulder shape, tapers in at the waist pretty well here. I mean, this is what we're going to see across the board in bikini because that's the criteria. Everybody knows it. Lower body wise, yeah, so a bit leaner, right? Because we start to see the upper glute looks a little bit depleted here. Does show a tie-in, but legs overall do not appear to be as developed as the other class winners in this grouping here. So she wins her class, nothing to scoff at, very great quality physique, especially for NPC level. But I'm trying to give you further insight now into how we get the overall. And she just doesn't have that same depth of, glutes or hamstring tie-in, any of that. Let's move on now to a couple more of our class winners in this group. So now we're going to bring in Shannon. So Shannon, class E. Sorry if I'm fumbling a little bit today, by the way, you guys. I'm still getting used to this new layout. I'm like, oh, where are we at? What are we doing? Okay. So Shannon, class E winner, and then Emily, class F winner. So again, we start to see a little bit of muscle going on. Let's look at Emily first because it's just drawing more attention here first. A lot of shoulder size, and this is what we kind of see as the height classes go up. More muscle on these physiques generally tend to happen by nature, honestly. Like when I'm working with athletes that are taller, they have more muscle. That's just the way it goes because they are overall taller, bigger athletes. So she's got a lot of muscle going on here. Great taper into the waist. Lower body looks good. Glute structure seems to be on point and balancing with the quads and the hamstrings. We'll have to wait till we get to the back and see. Also, just want to make note of, how the conditioning at this event, pretty on par for all of the athletes. A few that are a little bit leaner, but nobody's really blatantly overly soft right now. You're getting a very clear insight into conditioning you need to have for bikini. Keep in mind, these are all class winners. They won their class. So if your goal is to go win your bikini class, this is what you want to kind of focus on. Those soft lines that you see in the glutes, a little bit in the quads, a little bit in the shoulders. Not too much more, though, because you get leaner, that's a problem. If you're softer, obviously, everybody knows that's going to be a problem. Looking over here at Shannon, not as much coming from the shoulders, but still, we get the shape. Pulls into a very narrow waist here. And again, in the amateurs, in the NPC, there's always going to be posing differences. There's a lot of things I would do with posing. I don't often talk a ton about the posing. If you want me to bring up more posing stuff in my videos, comment that. Say, yes, love to hear more feedback on posing, more stuff, because I could do that. I could tell you a lot more about that. But if you don't care, I'll stick to the physiques. All right, let's get down to it. So Shannon, good overall glute shape, a little bit more from the hamstrings to the quads. This pose, again, just is not like accentuating her physique as well as I think it could. So, posing tweaks I would suggest, but that's just my opinion. Let's go to the back where we can get a clearer picture here. So again, from the back, pretty clear that the judges went with more muscle at this event. They went with more of a tie-in look, more of a 3D effect from the glutes, and overall, that's what they chose, more lower body muscle, because there's actually some athletes in this grouping of these class winners that do have, a bit more upper body muscle, but they're not the ones that are winning. However, Autumn definitely has the most lower body muscle, the most 3D effect to the glutes, the most tie-in. That's what judges seem to favor here. So looking over at Shannon, good overall shoulder shape. Tapers in pretty well, all good. Not as much, coming from the glutes though. Just not as much of that upper glute and not as much for the depth. The tie-in's not really pulling through as much. So great to win the class. The difference here, what we're talking about is the overall win. And I think that that's really coming from the glutes and the tie-in at this event for sure. Bikini competitors, the rules state, slight separation between glute and hamstring tie-in. Typically, honestly, Autumn, it could go either way because sometimes that look doesn't actually favor you on stage, but it did here. So that's the fun of bikini division. Looking over at Emily, right, you got the shoulder shape tapers in, really good overall shape. Glutes just appear to be a little bit under in their size. They look pretty balanced from the front, but from the back, the quads and the hamstrings do kind of overpower what's going on in the glutes. So a little bit more size to the glute would be key here to, advanced placing, have that shot at that overall. So yeah, that's basically where we're at, folks. Let me know if you have any questions, you like these ideas, the videos, you have any shows you want me to cover, you like the direction for bikini right now, and of course, check out the free trial if you haven't yet. You really want to. I got a lot of great stuff for you. Check that out. Thanks for watching. Coach Ryan is out.